Grand Rising, guys and goddesses. How are you this morning? I hope that you are doing well. I got about 20 minutes before I got to get off of here and get into this 9 to 5. But I did want to bring part 3 of Power of Perception to you on this morning's Petals of Wisdom. So before we get into it and get too far into it, I would like to introduce myself to all of those who may not know who I am. I am the one, the only Zaya, Samai, Kefir, Sakim, Haruki Met, and I help overgivers who struggle to speak their truth and be themselves, craft and implement the ultimate blueprint to total life transformation through alchemy, psychology, and herbalism. Good morning. If you are joining me, please drop a lotus, drop a blue heart. Let me know you're there. Say hello. Say, hey, girl. Don't forget to go to streamyard.com/Facebook to give StreamYard permission for YouTube to see your face, see your name, so that I can know who's dropping comments as I'm talking. So I've been talking about the power of perception on the past 2 lives for Petals of Wisdom, and I'm bringing you a part 3, and I want to talk about the dynamics. So in the first part, I talked a lot about just like what perception is, how it influences our day-to-day life, and what we can do to make sure that our perception is more in alignment with reality. In the second part, I talked about the power of perception through the lens of different attachment styles. Okay. Today, I want to talk about the power of perception in family dynamics, particularly in the Black community, because you know I'm all about the bliggity Black here. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Thanks for joining. Let me know you're here. Drop a lotus, drop a blue heart, drop a zen, Let me know if any part of this resonates with you, and please feel free to ask any questions or to even challenge what I'm saying. Okay. Although I am a healer, I am a perpetual student. Okay. So I'm always open to different perceptions, different angles of a concept, and just always learning and evolving. So let's get into it. So the main point that I wanted to get into today with the power of perception, we recall um, what I explained about perception before. Perception is not reality. Perception is nothing more than how you see a situation, a person, place, thing, or idea based on your past experiences of what you've been through. Okay. So, a lot of ways that your perception is largely influenced by how you were indoctrinated and conditioned as a child, how you were programmed as a child. It will largely be connected to it influences your beliefs. It influences how you relate to people. It influences a lot of different things. Okay. But perception itself is not reality. It is the filter through which you are experiencing and perceiving reality. Okay. So when we think about that and we think about family dynamics, our perception causes us to play a role in the matrix that's based solely on who we believe we are. Okay. So when we think about what that means, it can mean a lot of different things. And who you really are must be in alignment in order to experience the best version of your life that you want to live. Um, I've already stated that our perception of ourselves and the world around us is largely influenced by a European need for control. Can we please just get into that for a moment? If you feel like you didn't, like, your life was not influenced by, outside forces that control. If you think race didn't have nothing to do with, the type of lifestyle that you grew up living, if you think religion and, social status and, all those different things were not influenced by outside forces, and you were able to create this bubble, then this is not for you. But for those people who realize that you were not even safe in your own home because you were being raised by parents who had been conditioned under a Eurocentric indoctrination or doctrine. So let's talk about different examples of that. Religion would be the first one. Okay. African Americans, large about, are Christian. Different, you might be Baptist, you might be, whatever. There are some who are Jewish, that are Catholic, but all of these are organized religions that were created by a European power, particularly the Vatican. The Vatican would travel all across the world hand in hand with the conquerors and the colonizers, and go into different countries and say, we're taking over your country. We are, we institute these different laws. We want these resources. We want these slaves. We want whatever it was that they were doing. And if you want to maintain some type of control, or if you want to avoid the consequences of our colonization, then you have to give up your way of life, your culture, your beliefs, your language, and you have to what do they call it? You have to cross over into our religion. You have to take on our religion. You have to become a Christian. You have to become a Catholic. Whatever sect of religion they were pushing in that particular part of the world. Well, we know in America that's Christianity. Okay. We know that when our ancestors were brought here, they had their own language. They had their own spiritual practices. That had their own rites and rituals. They had a myriad of skills, and it became illegal for our ancestors to practice their culture, because their culture was the one thing that kept them in power against being oppressed. That kind of thinking was passed down from generation to generation and morphed into all kinds of social constructs that we experience today. So, being raised as a Christian in African American society, you know by now that it's a catch 22. Okay? It's a catch 22. While the practice itself feels good, it has helped, it is healed, it has also been infiltrated by, malicious forces that really wanted to control. Okay. So, a lot of the things that we have been taught as members of organized religion are very much so um, implanted ideas within the practice itself. The practice is not pure. So many different ideas have been implanted. For example, this idea that God is outside of you, that if you need something, if you want something, if you're trying to make something happen, then you're praying to an entity outside of yourself to make it happen. When in reality, the original forms of these different types of spirituality actually taught that God is within you, because you are a microcosm of the great all. So therefore, you have the dominion within you to manifest whatever it is, to not only manifest, but to also co-create with the universe. But growing up in different households, Christianity meant that you were born into sin, that the feminine principle was absent from spirituality. You prayed to Jesus, and um just what it was like growing up in that kind of household, and being indoctrinated in that way. For a lot of people it works, but for many of us it did not work, because it left us feeling like there was no winning, that we could never achieve a sense of validity, we could never achieve a sense of peace, that we had to wait until we died to experience heaven, when many of us feel like we deserve to, experience heaven on earth. So religion is one way that we've been indoctrinated. And the sad thing about it is it creates division within our community. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter what spirit that you pray to. It doesn't matter what you call this spirit, right? We want to believe that everybody's praying to a different God because we call it different names, and we make it look a different way. Well, the power of perception has influenced that, because if you are Asian, then you're gonna pray to Buddha, you're gonna pray to Krishna, which is, the I think Krishna is like is the Indian version of Christ. If you are American, then you pray to Jesus. But if you are into ATR, then you might pray to the Natiru, or you might pray to the Orishas. Or if you are a part of Voodoo or New African Vodou, then there's a different sect for each one, right? And within each one of these sectors, the deities look like the people who are you know participating in the practices. We've been taught that that is wrong, that everybody's supposed to be praying to this one entity that looks like a European straight haired white man. So that's one way. And then when we come across people within our community who choose to reject that and say, I'm going to go a different route, I want to go with something that resonates more with my heritage and where I come from, that actually exalts the best parts of me and the natural way that I am, you want to tell them that they wrong. You want to tell them that they evil. You want to tell them that they demons, that is the work of the devil. And that's not the case. That's your perception, because someone taught you at a very young age that anything outside of what you are doing is wrong. And that programming, that code that they placed in you, was a code that was placed in them and their ancestors in order to control, to create a slave and keep that slave in check. That is not a comfortable conversation to have, but it is a reality. Does that mean that organized religion does not have any good in it? No, it does not. It just means it needs to be decolonized. And it means those of us who choose to practice within it are taking the time to know the difference between our perception of um, what is true and the actual reality, or what was really meant. Self-image is another way that perception plays a role within our family dynamics. So I will use myself as an example, just because trying to create something else is difficult to do. Okay, so self-image, I've talked about this a lot. Colorism was something that I grappled with as a child and as an adolescent. And it was an issue because of what I learned from my mom, right? So my mom grew up in a community where light bright was right. Okay. And and a lot of times the way that it was packaged and messaged, it was subtle, it was subversive, it was in the advertising and the marketing and the aesthetic, right? The concept that light skin, European features were on a black body was more appealing and more socially acceptable than others. And so My mom essentially, under that programming, said things and did things that I internalized to mean that I was not pretty, I was not worthy. And it just, it set me on a whole journey in which I had to take back my own power and create my own perception of what is beautiful. Okay. So that's one example of a family dynamic in which perception was everything. She perceived that the world was not going to be kind to me because I am dark skinned. She perceived that I was going to have situations where I was going to be made fun of, where people were going to treat me differently because of my dark skin. And she did what she felt she needed to do to try and protect me and prepare me for that. And so that was her perception. So what she based on what she perceived from the outside world, she projected certain things onto me. Well intended, but not the right outcome. Ultimately, as the adult, I had to take control of my story. I had to assess my perception of myself. I had to assess my perception of what pretty was. I had to assess my perception of what value was. And I had to create a story that was more in alignment with my reality and not what somebody had imposed upon me, what somebody had projected upon me, and what I had internalized and made assumptions about. Okay. Social status. Let's talk about social status in the Black community. We place people in hierarchies based on a number of different things. Okay, we put them in social hierarchies based on how they look, based on how they dress, what they wear, based on how they speak, how many what neighborhoods they lived in, what schools they went to, what crews they ran with. That's what we do. And we do it because that's what's always been done. And then based on those rules, we then internalize that, take that personally, and make assumptions about who we should be, how we should formulate ourselves in order to fit into those different social constructs. So we perceive that we will not be accepted for who we truly are, what we naturally look like, and where we come from if we do not perform what is socially acceptable. If we don't add the hair extensions because the a natural manicure look is more socially acceptable than coming out the house with my fro and having nothing done to it. Putting on the lashes because it draws more attention than getting on here with a bare face and nothing done to it. Dressing to the nines because that's what we were taught to do, to fight the idea that we were poor and low class, right? We don't want to look like what we've been through. So perception influences us in that way. And when you think about different family dynamics and social status, it was it you can think about a lot of you can think about a lot of different scenarios. So I think about, like, on a community scale, knowing back in the day when, well, I'm saying back in the day, like racism don't still exist. It still exists, but when passing was a thing, back in the day and time when passing was a thing, there was a community of Black people who were grateful for the fact that their ancestors were raped by white people because they had white skin. Perception. Now, those words coming out of my mouth, you can actually go and read this in actual text where they say these things. By the way, I'm not I'm not just saying this. This is not just word of mouth. This is actually in writing in a lot of different places, right? Perception in that way. So perception influences a lot, and it causes us to play a role based on who we believe we are. I believe that I am a goddess, therefore I carry myself like a goddess in various different ways. I believe that a goddess embodies an overstanding of human nature on a grand scale from a bird's eye view. It also embodies um um like leveraging your natural gifts, your strengths, and knowing who you are, where you come from, knowing what power lies inside of you, how and how you can use that power to be who you are. Therefore, I carry myself in that way. I believe that people's opinions of me do not control my day-to-day life, and therefore do not have a lot of weight in how I carry myself and how I choose to manifest, how I choose to be in this world. That is not the case for a lot of people. Some people believe that they have to work to be understood by people. And so every time somebody says something that is out of alignment with what they believe themselves to be, they feel like they got to check them. They feel like they got to say something about it. Baby, I'm not going to waste my energy on trying to be understood by nobody no more. And that was a big thing for a long time for me. But now I'm coming into a season where being understood is no longer my concern. How you perceive the words coming out of my mouth, how you perceive my behavior, how you perceive my actions, is that's not my responsibility. However, the intention behind what my actions and my words, that's my responsibility. So you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna be immaculate with my words. I'm going to avoid taking things personal. I'm going to avoid making assumptions. I'm going to be skeptical to protect my energy, but I am also going to ask questions to make sure that I am not making assumptions. And I'm going to do my very best every day. How much time I got left? What time is it? All right, I got two more points and then I'm gonna get off of here. So um the next point that I wanted to make about the power of perception is we assign roles and characteristics to the participants in our stories based on our assumptions and the ideas we internalize, i.e., make personal, thus recreating or transforming the narrative we're focusing on. So let's talk about it. And how do we do this? We experience something, we allow it to register in our nervous system, and then we slap a label or a definition on that experience, and we use that as our frame of reference for new experiences. So if we take this from so let's take the same situation with my mother and the colorism, right? So when my mama stood me up in the bathroom and she said to me, "Oh, your skin is dark, but your skin is dark like me when I was your age, but you'll lighten up when you get older." For me, the moment she pointed out that difference, my heart sank. And at that moment, I was made aware that I was different from her. And she was and still is in many ways the standard that I hold myself to in terms of especially beauty and self-image. Every time I look in the mirror, I see my mommy. When I was younger, I couldn't see my mommy in me after she said what she said. Um, and because of how that registered in my nervous system and implanted on my DNA, I developed this perception of my mommy as this evil woman who did not love me for who I was and was always trying to change me, and who didn't think I was pretty. And based on that narrative that I created, and that character, that role that I put her in, I could not understand where she was coming from when she was talking to me about my complexion. right? So when we would have these conversations and she would say anything about my complexion with the with the best intentions in mind, I was still unable to receive. All I did was fight and tell her how wrong she was, and judge her for what she was saying. But what she was really trying to express to me is, baby girl, this world is not kind to people who are dark skinned. And in order to be able to protect yourself and to be able to maneuver in this world, knowing this, you don't have to operate a certain way. Now you can have everybody can have their opinions about that. There's a lot of different levels to that, because she could have chosen to say, to speak to the reality of colorism and be honest about that, and give me the tools, say things to empower me so that I am ready to combat that when I go out into the real world. But she tiptoed around the subject. She tiptoed around the subject because she was trying not to hurt my feelings. But she still ended up doing it because she is tackling an uncomfortable conversation, an uncomfortable reality that I had to deal with as her little chocolate black girl. Okay? So the role that I assigned to myself in this situation was one of a victim, one who was in a world that would not accept me for who I am, who would not view me as pretty, who would not view me as worthy. And I went through life um playing that role well into my 20s. It wasn't until my mid 20s until I really just released that idea altogether and decided that I'm gonna take control of my self-image. I'm gonna become Zaya, and I want Zaya to be the manifestation of peace and blessings earned with every lesson learned. And she's gonna be the most beautiful chocolate, seductive, sensual, intellectual. She gonna be anti everything that people said is not pretty, that people said is not acceptable, that cannot be socially acceptable in a professional environment, that cannot be socially acceptable in an intellectual environment, that cannot be socially acceptable when it comes to dressing to the nines and being pretty and going out and turning heads. I created that image for myself. So whenever you see me and you see, the different ways that I choose to express my creativity, it's very different. It's very different from everyone around me, because I'm intentional about that. Because there's a message that I'm sending. Last point, and I'm getting up off of here. So our family dynamics set the tone for the stories we play out on a daily basis. They even influence the characteristics we attribute to different participants. However, just because our view of the world begins with a doctored version of your truth, doesn't mean you have to stick with it. As an adult, you have the power to change your story, and I and then I did and what change your story and the identity you assign to each character. Okay. It wasn't until years later that I was able to fully understand where my mama was coming from. But I wasn't able to do that until I learned how to practice empathy. And I learned to accept the fact that the way I see things is not always the full picture. I'm gonna leave you with um this story and this quote. So the quote says, "The illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write. It will be those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn." When we begin to accept the fact that we were born into situations in in that came with doctrines that were intentionally designed to make us hate ourselves, that were intentionally designed to make us give up our power, that were intentionally designed to make us fail, then we can take hold of reality and create that reality for ourselves. We can let go of the beliefs that says that something is evil because it is not, because it's different from what we do. We can let go of the belief that something is not worthy, not valuable, because it's not wrapped in a certain um covering. And then we can begin to see the commonalities in people that we would never associate ourselves with. We can stop getting into unhealthy relationships because we were taught to choose people based on how they look, where they come from, and how society sees them. And we can start choosing people, friends, lovers, extended family, based on what we truly need as human beings, as spirits having a human experience. So Don Miguel Ruiz in the Fifth Agreement has a chapter where he talks about going into this theater, like the power of perception, and he uses the metaphor of a theater. So you go into a theater that's given the story of your life, right? And you are watching all of these different situations in your life play out on this big screen. However, these situations are being played out from the perception of everybody else around you and not your perception. Then you begin to see a bigger, fuller picture. You begin to see things from your mother's perspective. You begin to see things from your siblings' perspective. You begin to see things from your grandmother's perspective. You begin to see things from the perspective of the little kids in the neighborhood, at school, in your classroom, who you did or did not get along with, the ones who chose to bully you and things of that nature. You begin to see all of that, and you have a clearer picture. So I'm gonna leave you with this meditation and encourage you to think on it. Like this, it's a, you can use it as a journal prompt. You can meditate, whatever you want to do. How has your perception of yourself and others and the world around you influence the story that you are playing a role in every single day? Is the role that you're playing in the story that you are currently living out in alignment with your best self? Or is it merely an amalgamation of projections and societal impositions from others? Are you playing a role based on what somebody told you you should be doing? Or are you playing the role of your story? Have you taken control of your own narrative? If you have, great, wonderful. What can you do to continue to be an example to others around you? If you are not, how can you take control of your narrative and reconstruct the characters in your story to be in alignment with the best version of who you are? All right, y'all. I am Zaya the Lotus, the manifestation of peace and blessings earned with every lesson learned. I help overgivers who struggle to speak their truth and be their self, craft, and implement the ultimate blueprint to total life transformation through alchemy, psychology, and kinetic science, herbalism. Anyways, y'all know what I do by now. If you all right, y'all. I love you to life, and I look forward to taking this journey with you. Peace.